All right, today we're going undercover. We're going to be medical detectives. Our mission? To solve a pretty fascinating mystery that starts with something simple, a wound that just won't heal, but leads us deep inside our own bodies to a hidden war being fought inside our bones. You've probably had this happen, right? It's so frustrating. You clean it, you put a bandage on it, but some wounds, they refuse to close up. Well, that's because sometimes the real problem isn't on the surface at all. It's a sign that there's a conflict happening way, way deeper. I'm talking right down to the bone itself. So, our investigation kicks off with the first major clue, a wound that just won't heal, and, well, it keeps oozing. In the medical world, this is called a chronic discharging sinus. You can think of it like a persistent leak, a dead giveaway that the real issue is much deeper, pointing to a long, drawn-out battle happening right beneath the skin. And here it is, our main suspect. The official diagnosis, chronic pyogenic osteomyelitis. Now, that is a mouthful, I know, but pyogenic simply means pus producing. And here's the really interesting part. This isn't some new invader. In almost every single case, it's the ghost of an old fight, a sequel to a previous acute bone infection that was never truly 100% defeated. Okay, so to really get what's going on, we have to go directly to the crime scene. We're diving deep inside the long bones of the body, where this relentless, hidden conflict has been raging, sometimes for years. So let's meet the villain of our story, the sequestrum. What is it? It's a piece of bone that actually died during that initial infection, and instead of being cleared away by the body, it just sits there and becomes a fortress, a perfect, impenetrable hideout for bacteria. Let's pull up the profile on our villain here. A sequestrum is hard, it's rough, and it's porous, basically the perfect architecture for bacteria to hide in. But here's the most crucial part. Because this piece of bone is dead, the body's immune system treats it like a foreign object, like a splinter or a metal implant. And that's why antibiotics and our own immune cells can't touch the infection inside. It's hiding in a place they simply can't reach. But our body doesn't just give up. Oh no, it fights back. It starts building this incredible defensive wall called an involucrum. This is a sheath of new, living bone that grows around the infected area, desperately trying to contain the threat and stop it from spreading any further. But even this fortress has its weak points. As all that pressure from the infection builds up inside, it has to go somewhere. So it drills these tiny escape tunnels, called cloaca, right through the new bone. And this is the direct connection we've been looking for. These tunnels are what create that persistent, draining wound we see on the skin. The leak is coming all the way from deep inside the bone. So this is really the heart of the conflict, the central battle in our case. You've got the sequestrum, the dead bone, acting as a permanent fuel source for the infection. And then you have the involucrum, the living bone, forming a wall to try and contain it. It's a stalemate. And as long as that sequestrum is in there, this battle will never, ever end on its own. So if this war is happening so deep inside, how do doctors, our medical detectives, actually crack the case? Well, they have to piece together a very specific set of clues. The investigation always starts with the physical evidence. That signature draining wound is, of course, the biggest giveaway. A doctor might also feel this unusual, irregular thickening of the bone right under the skin. But what's really surprising is the lack of intense pain. Often, it's just a dull, deep tenderness, which is a big reason why this whole problem can go unnoticed for so long. But the smoking gun, the piece of evidence that really confirms everything, comes from an X-ray. You see, the dead bone of the sequestrum doesn't lose calcium like the living bone around it. So on an X-ray, it shows up as this unnaturally bright, dense white fragment standing out against the grayer, weaker living bone. It's almost like finding a ghost on the film. Okay, once the villain has been identified, it is time for action. This is not a case that can be solved with medicine alone. Nope. It requires a direct, decisive intervention, what we're calling the surgical takedown. And this is absolutely key. While antibiotics are definitely helpful to manage flare-ups and support the recovery process, they just can't get inside that dead sequestrum. So the only way to truly win this war is to physically go in there and remove the source of the infection. The treatment is, first and foremost, surgical. The surgical mission is basically a meticulous cleanup operation. First, they create a window in that new bone wall, the involucrum, to get inside and physically remove the sequestrum, the root of the whole problem.
Then they essentially power wash the area, reshaping the bone cavity and scraping away every last bit of infected tissue to make sure the infection has nowhere left to hide. Now this is just brilliant. How do surgeons know for sure they've removed all the dead tissue? Well, they look for something called the paprika sign. I'm not kidding. They keep cleaning out the bone until they see these tiny points of bleeding start to appear. This pinpoint bleeding on the bone's surface looks exactly like sprinkled paprika, and it is the definitive sign that they've reached healthy, living tissue. Mission accomplished. So the villain's been removed, the battle is finally won. But what happens next? Let's take a quick look at some potential long-term consequences and a few related cold cases.
Even after the main fight is over, there can be some long-term consequences. The bone can be left weakened, which puts it at risk for future fractures, or growth can be affected in younger patients. And while it is very rare, years and years of chronic inflammation can lead to even more serious issues down the road. It just really highlights why solving this hidden infection is so critical.
Now for a related cold case, Brody's abscess. This is a different kind of culprit altogether. It's a localized pocket of infection that forms inside the bone, but it's way sneakier. It tends to appear without any big preceding battle, staging a much more subtle, insidious siege from within.
So let's compare these two case files side by side. Our main suspect, chronic osteomyelitis, leaves that classic calling card, the draining sinus and that dense sequestrum on the x-ray. Brody's abscess? Totally different. The main clue there is a deep, boring kind of pain, and the x-ray shows a clean, circular cavity instead of a piece of dead bone. So you have two similar crimes, but two very